second time around, so we doing it in style. It's all elite, not accepting defeat. A lot can change in 1 year, but more can change in 1 week. Believe the hype, the train's leaving tonight. Hit the throttle, we heading straight to Chicago. It's only getting better, this is our future.
What's going on? Frankie Kazarian, Scorpio, Christopher Daniels, collectively known as SoCal and Central over SCU. You are listening to the All Elite Podcast, and it is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
All the way through,
See you later.
Welcome back, All Elite family, to another exciting edition of the All Elite Podcast, Wednesday night's main event edition. We are fresh off another episode of Wednesday night's Dynamite, one of the last episodes of the year. Next week will be the final episode of the year, so another exciting episode to sort of set things up. Joined, as always, by my co-host, Big Match AJ, the Beanie Man. AJ, how are things going?
Things are going all right. I've been sick this week, so that sucks, but other than that, I'm okay.
My boy is down but not out. He is hanging in there and here for another episode of the pod. So I hope you're feeling better soon, bud. But off of this week's episode of Dynamite, what were your thoughts, especially that main event? You were pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I loved the main event. I thought it was a great match this week for a main event. They kind of overdid the table spots, but other than that, I can't really complain, and that's not a big complaint. I didn't notice that super kick until you mentioned it, so I was still into the match pretty heavily despite that.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was easy to overlook, I think, especially if you're just a fan of AEW. You're kind of probably used to that type of thing. It was something, if the super kick we're referencing for people who are listening at home, if you watch the match, you saw, who was it, Ortiz, essentially set himself up to get super kicked in the face with a chair. I was watching the end of Dynamite with my girlfriend, and she totally lost her shit over how it made no sense, and it was hard to disagree with that. She made me rewind it and watch it, and I was kind of with AJ in the sense that it didn't really pull me out too bad. I thought it was a little silly, but it didn't really connect the way it did with her, but she's a much more casual fan, so it's just interesting to see this type of thing can really draw people out, because it once I did rewind it and had to rewatch it, I was like, damn, that's pretty dumb when you think about it. Her point was he could easily have moved, gotten himself out of the way. He basically put his own face into the chair and just waited. And based upon the camera angle that they utilized for that, it just really didn't look good. And so her freaking out about that kind of blew the end of the match for me, but it was a good match nonetheless. Decent enough main event. Let's go ahead and just start from the top of this week's Dynamite. We had Jon Moxley in a quick match against Alex Reynolds, literally 5 seconds, something that they were pushing as the record time of a match in AEW, so I think that's something they'll give to Moxley for a while. But another quick and decisive win for Moxley, another reason to establish him as the just the number one contender, the top guy. So very quick and easy win there for Mox. And post-match, we have Chris Jericho come out and essentially offer Mox a spot in the Inner Circle. Interesting little promo there from Jericho, but nonetheless a good opening segment for Dynamite, if nothing else.
I thought it was cool. It's something to tease. It's the promo, that is. It's something to keep in mind. And I don't know, Moxley and Jericho would go well together, both of them being WWE guys, like he was saying. So I don't know. I'm into this. And if he actually did join, I think I would love it.
And kudos to them to just immediately referencing the backstory there and the history these two guys have. In WWE, sometimes you'll get the references, but it's definitely not direct and right in front of you from the very beginning. And we just got these, especially with guys like AJ Styles and their work in TNA or their matches with Kurt Angle, stuff like that. You don't get a lot of those references. So for AEW to be very comfortable with just saying, yep, we have a history together, but hey, maybe we don't need a fight. And it's a cool little story. Obviously, Moxley isn't going to join the Inner Circle, but it has that little bit of a possibility, I guess. But I mean, it was cool. He didn't just immediately attack Jericho, which is good for a character like Moxley, I think, to develop the idea of potentially just considering it or whatever. So not just automatically getting, because the unhinged Dean Ambrose would have just immediately went to kill Jericho and got destroyed by everyone around him. At least Moxley has the sense to say, okay, I'm not going to just kill Jericho right now. I'll let them think I'm giving it a chance, and then when the time comes, I'll turn on them or whatever. So, cool enough.
Yeah, and I can't imagine Jon Moxley not being a lone wolf kind of character, but like you said, it was refreshing to see him not just start throwing the DDTs and going arms blazing. So I don't know. I liked it too, like you were saying.
Yeah. It was just a solid opening segment, really quick, right to a first match, not a long match at all, and then right to, it's almost a change on the regular formula of professional wrestling where you just open with a long segment like this where there's just talking. Instead, we got a match in first. It was a quick, short match, but then we got the 5-10 minutes of talking, and it didn't seem like the traditional formula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very non-traditional. It was the way they've been booking the show is just nice because you're so used to having promos first with WWE. You condition that way, and to see them consistently put on matches first, I just love it.
Yeah, it's definitely an added benefit for AEW, something that they've done well for sure. After that introduction, we get the match, The Butcher and the Blade versus Cody and QT Marshall. A decent little match here. They set it up pretty well with the introductions. I think they did the whole match announcements before this and then got to that match. They ran down the card for the show, gave us a little bit of what we would see tonight, so that was cool. And then we get to this match, and as Cody's making his entrance, MJF essentially says that while Cody gave the Butcher, the Blade, and the Bunny the option to choose his partner, it was actually MJF who chose QT Marshall and basically just told Cody to suck it. They had a pretty decent match. I didn't see this as anything killer from the Butcher and the Blade that necessarily made me think they could be, or they needed to be, standouts in this tag team division that do have some really, really, really great teams. That said, they didn't do anything horrible to say they don't deserve to be in AEW. It just wasn't a huge shining moment for them. In some ways, it felt like they were trying to do something with QT Marshall, and the fans got behind him. But I just don't see a purpose in anything more than just this match or something like that with QT. You don't need to continue. This can just sort of be his introduction to being the Brandon Cutler type.
I don't know. I like the Butcher and the Blade. I'm gonna disagree. I don't know that I'm gonna disagree harshly because I don't think they did anything to necessarily really stand out. Disclaimer: I took a painkiller before the show, so maybe it was that. But I thought they did a great job. I thought they looked really good, and I really love their look and their whole kind of vibe right now. So I'm into it. This sold me on them.
Yeah, I guess my point is just that it didn't really turn me one way or the other per se.
Okay.
Especially because after the and not that I expected a huge beatdown after the match or anything like that. We'll get to what actually happened after the match. But after the match, they didn't really do anything. They just sort of left. They picked up their victory over QT, who's not really. He's just not that great. They also fed to him quite a bit, in a sense. I think that at any time they were in with QT, it should have just been pure domination for them.
I agree with that.
Again, it wasn't so much my problem with them, I would say. It's just the booking of this match was essentially to make the fans get behind QT, and it worked, but I just don't see the point. I don't see the point in trying to put over QT as opposed to, unless they had just killed him afterwards. And I get why they didn't do that, but
I'm thinking, and I was thinking this during the match, that QT is a prime contender to be in the Dark Order, and maybe that's why they're trying to get you over on him, so that if you turn heel, it actually matters.
Yeah, and I would agree with you 100% there. If they make that choice with him, that would be fine. There's just not a whole lot there for me with QT, and that's not to say that he does a bad job, because he did quite a few things that were sort of impressive or you didn't expect to see from him. And that, again, I said it got the crowd behind him. I just don't see the point, because while you got the crowd behind him, once they beat him, it wasn't like the crowd was super disappointed that he lost.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going to do that, you should have him just be absolutely destroyed after, literally beat down, almost bloodied by these two. But I get again why they didn't, because instead after the match we have Darby Allin come out. Cody's by the not apron,
rail.
By the rail, yes. He's by the rail, and he looks very dejected and upset with his loss. And Cody looks at him, or Darby comes down, looks at him, offers a handshake, and we have some type of union between these two, which is pretty awesome. Darby went on Twitter afterwards to say, let's get a rematch, me and you against the Butcher and the Blade, and then if we win, I want my rematch. So basically,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool way to set it up, a cool way to push that match being important too. So I hope that they kind of get this tag team match out of the way next week, so we can go into the first of the year looking at Cody versus Darby.
Definitely. I didn't know he did that on Twitter, so that's awesome. I'm not sure how I feel about Cody fighting these guys again, because I feel like you probably should just use them to get over on Cody, but like you said, they really just got on over in QT
Well,
Marshall.
and here's the problem with that, is if they do it next week and Cody and Darby do win, which you would want, I'm not saying, I don't know necessarily that it's a guarantee, but you would want, and it would set up a really good match. You then essentially just 50-50 booked the Butcher and the Blade to look like not much. Like they could only win because you had inserted a jobber into this team with Cody. If you insert a legitimate, not even, because Darby's not even a main player in a sense that he's won a lot. He's been in some really high-profile matches, but he hasn't won a lot. So if all of a sudden Darby aligning with Cody means that they can then beat the Butcher and the Blade, it's still not like a high-profile team. It's not like Cody and Kenny per se. Like that's two stars beating the Butcher and the Blade. Instead, it's Cody and just like, I don't want to say that Darby's just another guy because he's become really popular, but in terms of wins and losses, he's just another guy.
Yeah, I agree. And like you're saying, that would really kill the heat for me with Butcher and the Blade. So I'm hoping, I don't know, like
it's tough because you want to see Cody and Darby win because you want that match, but again, it would really kill that heat for them. And honestly, it would almost benefit them to win that then, because the fans would be pretty pissed, if you somehow they win and go over on Darby and Cody and then do some type of beatdown and prevent the fans from seeing the Cody versus Darby match.
Yeah,
but then I feel like we would get an extension of Cody versus these guys, and it just feels weird. I feel like it's better to kind of get away from this for Cody because he has a lot going on.
I think so too. It's just putting a lot on Cody's plate here, and then you're hyping up two matches, Darby and Cody, and you're hyping up MJF and Cody, and I don't know, it's a lot, like you said.
Yeah, so instead, if they just sort of go with that 50-50 booking with Cody and Darby winning, and then you run Cody and Darby at the first of the year, and you have MJF address it at the first of the year, it all feels a lot smoother. So in that sense, I think if we do get that match next week, that's probably the outcome we'll get, but it just doesn't bode well for the Butcher and the Blade. From there, speaking of MJF comes out post-match. He calls in one of the tech guys, says that last week he was laughing at the things Cody said about his crossroads that he did. He forces the tech guy to kiss his finger and then hits him or kiss his ring, I should say, and then hits him with a pretty good-looking crossroads. He then,
good to me.
Yeah, and then he cuts a good promo on Cody. He accepts Cody's challenge, which says that he's going to have stipulations that he's going to reveal on January 1st, as I just said. So a good way to build to that. I didn't mind the announcement of an announcement, as Joseph called it, but it was.
I didn't either,
because MJF is solid on the mic. So
he's really solid. He's more than solid. He's maybe one of the best on the mic today, and he's just so damn good that I didn't really think of it as an announcement for an announcement. I thought it was just MJF being a heel, and he's so good at that, so I'm down with it.
Making the people wait, essentially, for what his announcements, what his stipulations are going to be, and it does leave you to wonder for a week or two of what they could be, because, Cody's already bad enough at picking stipulations himself, so MJF could have just let him choose the match, and Cody would have probably chose, like, Brandy Rhodes on a pole with Wardlow and MJF against Cody. Like, Cody just wants all the odds stacked against him anyway. So
yeah, and if he had been like, "Oh, I'm going to announce if I'm going to wrestle him on January 1st," I would have been miffed. But he didn't do that. It's just the stipulations for whatever that match is going to be, and I'm assuming that match is going to be on the pay-per-view, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, it's a good way to extend the pay-per-view. Being planned for late February, so a good way to push things out there and make this feud go and last a little bit longer without cutting right to the chase, which is fine.
Yeah.
From there, we get a quick Dark Order vignette. They are trying to recruit Alex Reynolds, who did the job to Moxley early in the show. Reynolds is then spoken to by his Beaver Boys partner, and he's asking him what's going on, and Reynolds doesn't really know. Decent little setup to maybe see the Beaver Boys during the Dark Order, or maybe just Alex Reynolds himself. Not too familiar with him or the Beaver Boys, but a good way to introduce them, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we were talking about on Monday, they're going after the jobbers, the downtrodden.
And they said it themselves, in the promo.
Jobber. Aren't you tired of being a jobber? And I thought that was so good, and it's just perfect. This is exactly what I want to be seeing from the Dark Order. And like we were talking about before, we didn't want to see these vignettes get dragged out. And by doing this, I don't feel like they're being dragged out. I feel like something is actually happening.
Yeah, we're building to something where we could see one or more of these jobbers join the Dark Order and sort of help the Dark Order or something like that. So that's really cool. I think that Reynolds' introduction is cool because he's not someone anyone in the AEW audience or fan base could be too familiar with unless you do follow those indies that he's on, because even his work in AEW have been really quick job matches. He was in the match against Mox tonight. He was in the LAX match. Like, he hasn't even gotten a lot of time to shine or do anything in AEW, so this is a real chance for him to get a fresh start. Also, if he joins the Dark Order now, he'll go into I'm constantly assuming that they're going to reset the records, but if they reset the records going into the new year, he'll go in with a fresh slate too. So a good time for anyone to join the Dark Order, I'd say, because if you're going to get a fresh slate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another reason why they really should be resetting it around January 1st, because it's just so fitting when doing this whole gimmick where all of these job guys are probably going to end up going to the Dark Order. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
I hope it's a thing that they extend out. I know that we had said we didn't want the vignettes to be drug out, but as we're talking about it now, I would like to see one person join, and then they just sort of remain a unit, and then they can continually bring people in. So that way, maybe Alex Reynolds sort of establishes himself as like a top guy in the Dark Order. We get another guy to come in, and this guy's being favored, and Reynolds isn't too happy with it. And then they have a few, like, there's so much you could do with this type of gimmick and storyline, and very much like if anyone has seen Fight Club and just the issues that come within that cult like situation when one person becomes more favored than others in the group, and just the internal struggle you can really build, and that kind of interesting story you can tell with that, I think would be cool. So something you could really drag out there potentially.
There's so much you can do with this, and really I'm just excited to see what's going on with the Dark Order, which is a really big, refreshing statement, because before, every time you saw the Dark Order, it was like, this again, but now it's one of the highlights of every week. Yeah,
it's a solid 360 and a thing that I hope that they are able to pay off with in some type of way. And even though Reynolds isn't a popular face, he could be that if they give him a chance to shine. Whoever joins the Dark Order can sort of flip the switch and go from losing all the time to winning consistently. It could be cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone else I would like to see win consistently. We saw Big Swole pick up a big win tonight against Emi Sakura. Emi Sakura, I believe, ranked number 3 still. If not 3, then definitely 4. Definitely in that top 5. Big Swole, not ranked whatsoever, just got her official AEW contract this week and picks up a pretty impressive win. Hikaru Shida was watching in the crowd. I think we got a hint to the idea we might see Big Swole and Hikaru down the line, or something of that nature. Nonetheless, a good showcase match for Big Swole. Nothing too, I would say, crazy great, but nothing too bad either.
Yeah, I was in and out of this match because something came up while I was watching it. But aside from that, Big Swole looked good, Emi Sakura looked good, and we were talking about wanting this match to get 10 minutes. I think that's exactly what it got, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it was, I don't know, it was a nice, good match. Nothing to complain about here.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I really like about it is it gave Big Swole that time to establish her presence, because she has a presence, that a different appeal to her and something different that you really were able to see within this match. And she was really able to show not just that she's really strong, but also very charismatic. I don't know if you saw the spot where she sort of did a split, took the microphone, did like a moonwalk, and she did something really in it, like cool
awesome.
And kind of different, and utilized Emi Sakura's gimmick against her, and never really used it as a weapon but as a prop, and was able to show her charisma through that. And it was pretty cool. I was like, that's cool, you showed something else besides the fact that you're a strong wrestler, and that's important for someone with that gimmick that might just be placed as a strong wrestler only in other companies, you know.
And she is really charismatic, great on the mic, and a lot of these girls who are more new to the business aren't as good on the mic as Big Swole comes naturally to it, and just her charisma oozes out, like you're saying, from everywhere.
Absolutely. So a big future for Big Swole, and something I would have to expect, like a Hikaru Shida match in the future, just the way that they set it up with the crowd work and everything, which could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
from there, we get an interview with Pac, and he's essentially demanding his rubber match once again. I feel like this was almost the same exact promo. It might have even been the same promo on social media. I don't think they would use the same one from 2 weeks ago, but it was so similar that I'm not totally positive it wasn't. But he just demands his rubber match with Omega, and I hope that this is another one I want to see in the first few weeks of January, not something extended out to the next pay-per-view like we had talked about with MJF and Cody, because I just, like, Pac and Omega is a good match, don't get me wrong, but we did it at the last one of the last pay-per-views. We've just done it on TV. Like, it would feel like a bit much to do it again on pay-per-view per se, but maybe on a big TV show.
Yeah, like the anniversary show or Homecoming or Bash at the Beach or whatever you want to do. You have a lot of options, but absolutely, I agree. This is not something to drag out for what would be like nearly 3 months if you did that, yeah.
Well, yeah, and if you count the first match, that would probably be near 6 months, you know?
Yeah, so it's definitely something I want to see sooner rather than later. But I'm glad they're continuing it, and I'm glad they're not just giving it to us right away, because then it would feel like 50-50 booking, and it's not, obviously, because it's a rubber match, but nonetheless, it would feel like a bit too soon after we just got the last one.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, and so definitely a good setup to that, and hell, I think it would almost be better if they kind of keep ignoring Pac, and Pac maybe even just kills somebody else. Mm-hmm. He doesn't even have to destroy Omega.
I'd love that. I'd love it if Pac just became kind of unhinged and started attacking people, because he's so
right
good at being that
He hasn't been featured much in matches because they're trying to hold him down on the rankings now, like, you know?
Yeah.
Pac is being
Absolutely.
screwed, so...
He is, and if anybody deserves to start kicking ass and just killing people, it's Pac.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Pac with that is there's kind of a story to it too, you know, or at least they could build one into it where they have heat with Pac just for never really showing up to that first match that he was supposed to have with Hangman, and that's why he's never getting his opportunity he deserves because of that. And you never know, they could incorporate some of that real life stuff into it that could make quite a bit of sense in the storyline as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I'd love that. If Pac really does anything, I'm going to love it. So I can't say too much to that. But Pac has been so good. He's great on the mic. He delivered a great promo, even though it was quick. And I don't know, whatever he does next, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm excited to see it.
Absolutely. And then after that promo, we get Tully Blanchard also cutting a quick promo, talking about how he and Shawn Spears might be interested in recruiting Kip Sabian, potentially a tag team down the line. Another nice little setup for that. And we get Kip Sabian and Shawn Spears taking on Kenny Omega and Hangman Page. About halfway through the match, the lights go out, and Joey Janela has Tully Blanchard tied up at the top of the ring ramp. This was a little weird to me because I like, it might just be because I saw the vignette beforehand and then assumed Tully came out with Shawn, but I thought Tully was at the ring the whole time. So when he was all of a sudden at the top of the ramp, I was like, what the hell?
I could see why that would be weird.
And even more so, like, why did he not go out with Spears when he's gone out with Spears every other time? Why was Spears not concerned that his manager, who has always been out there, wasn't with him this time?
I would say it was a little hokey, and I don't like that because we keep putting these Joey Janela in these hokey gimmicks. But nonetheless, I didn't mind it. I thought it was fine because I was aware Tully Blanchard wasn't there. I thought he was just like watching the match from the back to study him.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense now that you mention it. But nonetheless, I thought it was okay. I don't want to say I liked it or disliked it. I didn't really. I feel like there's a better way to have done this. Like, you could pop on the Titantron instead of having the lights go out, and you could have Joey Janela in the back beating the hell out of Tully Blanchard. I feel like that would have been a more natural way to do this.
Well, and what I also don't love about this is you are doing this really forced storyline between Spears and Janela when you very easily could do a very interesting story with Kip and Joey.
Yep.
And it might not be one that fans understand at first, but it would be one that is very easy to explain. You would get much better promos from Janela because they would be a lot more realistic. They could get a lot more edgy. It would be a lot more interesting. But instead, we're pushing this situation with Spears. And it's something that I wasn't even sure they were going to continue with. And the fact that he's constantly like so close to a program with Kip makes it even more weird because
It is
people
weird.
saw Janela with Penelope in the early stages of AEW, and now they see Penelope with Kip, and there has been no story to explain why. There has been no really anything where you could have had something really like hot up to this point that would have made both guys good. And I could understand if it's one of those situations where backstage Kip isn't comfortable with it, or Penelope's not comfortable with it, or Joey's not, and so they're not going to force the issue. But if that's the case, they are all bad at making money.
Yeah, totally agree. And
that's not
I
something
wouldn't
Joey would
be-
do. So
No, I wouldn't be necessarily upset about this if the Shawn Spears and Joey Janela feud had heat, and it really doesn't. And I know they've been trying things and they've been going at each other or whatever, but like you said, I wasn't even sure they were going to continue this. So all the heat for me died. If they had, I don't know, done this maybe a week or two ago, I would have been like, okay, but they didn't, and it just feels like it kind of dropped off the world. And I don't know what's going on.
He just had a match with
Joey
Moxley.
Janela,
Why
really.
does he still care about Shawn Spears?
It's
Why does
very
he
odd.
want revenge for the $45 ring match? Like,
I don't know. And I don't really understand this feud. If I understood this feud better, I would be totally fine with this, and I would say, oh, no, I disagree with you. But no, Kip Sabian and Joey Janela is the way more natural fit right now.
yeah. So, and if you're not gonna do that, quit keeping them so close together.
Yep.
Like, you have a roster full of talent that you could have put with Spears in this match. So whatever, but just not something I liked in this match. After that, Spears, of course, goes to try and help Tully, and him and Joey brawl to the back, leaving Kip all by himself to lose to Kenny Omega and Adam Page, which I thought was a little weird because, like, Kenny and Hangman don't need a handicap situation to win. But nonetheless, they get a handicap situation, which is it set up the finish where Omega hits the V-trigger, getting ready to hit the one-winged angel. Hangman tags in blindly and hits his finish for the 1-2-3, and Omega is kind of confused by this, but Kenny's happy-go-lucky, so he really didn't care.
Mind it, yeah, he was fine with it. But it is kind of pushing that Adam Page into that heel direction a little more, which I like, because I really don't know what they're doing with Adam Page right now. And if for the pay-per-view, say, we got Kenny Omega and Adam Page, I think I would like that a lot more than Kenny Omega and Pac.
Yeah, and especially if they can even build it up to where it's a face versus face match going into the pay-per-view, where you're looking for one of them to snap at the pay-per-view, where they have another tag team match announced for next week. Those two will be paired up again, going up against Proud and Powerful, I believe, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, so they will be going up against those two and continuing as a tag team, which is cool because they must be laying the groundwork for this feud, if not now, then for months down the road. But I think it's coming within, maybe even by this pay-per-view like you were talking about, where we sort of get Hangman to snap at some point, because he's dying for a win, and he was dying for a win so bad that he stole it from Kenny this week, and he might be willing to do it again next week.
Absolutely, and I feel like that's where we're going to get more of a dissension going down the line, where Adam Page and Kenny Omega have more heat going forward, and then maybe like just slowly plant the seeds, you know?
And it's good because both guys have sort of followed the same fate in AEW, where they've had an up and down time thus far within the company. Haven't had a ton of wins or losses either way. Have both sort of been down on their luck in a lot of ways compared to what you might have expected going into the beginning of the company. So this might be the big opportunity to sort of build up both of them, maybe a big feud for Hangman especially. So we'll have to wait and see, especially over the next couple of weeks, but I hope we get something.
Yeah, I do too.
And it really could honestly come next week, as I think about this, just because with that week off, it gives you that week to leave it on fans' minds.
Linger, yeah.
Maybe even have Hangman cut a promo for social media or something that you can put out. And then it's a good idea to just push it for a week, and then you go into the first where you're just wondering what happened to Hangman. Like, there's no explanation until that point, maybe, and builds that hype as well for that show, because they're doing a good job at building up that first of the year show for people to have a reason to want to watch, which is good because it's a holiday show. So
yeah.
Then following that match, we get another Brandy Rhodes promo. She talks about Riho's absence. She talks about inviting Chris Statlander, and she says that she has a new member who's yet to be seen.
No, he was there, but she was just like, it was the bald guy.
Your
she was
note
like, oh,
says
don't turn
who
around.
has yet to be seen.
Well, you know what I mean. He's turned around.
Well, I didn't pay much attention to this segment, so
That's fair.
I went with AJ's notes, and that's about it. Brandy just isn't doing it for me. I don't know.
I don't like that we have two Colt gimmicks going on at the same time, or I would maybe slightly defend this. But
it feels like in some ways they're trying to transition it a little bit, where she wasn't so much in a culty. Like, I get it, still, it's definitely that cult feel, but it felt like they pulled back a little bit, maybe from like the cultness of it, or like the,
I don't know, she's shaving people's heads and ripping off hair and recruiting new members. It
I guess I'm
feels
just
like the
talking
straight
about
up
the
society to me.
aesthetic, because they weren't like around like gothic chairs and like candles and all of that. They were more so in a dark area backstage, just together as a group, without really pushing that goth like type of, which was something they were really pushing. I feel like
They were.
that medieval or something. So
Which is good they're getting away from it.
Absolutely. So yeah, there was a Brandy promo. From there, we get Chris Jericho and Jake Hager coming out. They are taking over the commentary booth for the Luchasaurus versus Sammy G match, which was really great. I liked the fact that they got involved and took over the commentary booth, kept JR around with the two, and we got a decent little match between Sammy G and Luchasaurus, which Luchasaurus ends up picking up the win by disqualification, correct? Because Hager and Jericho got involved? Yeah, Jericho.
Well, he was not by disqualification. He got the pin.
Oh, okay.
But
so
they ran in right after.
Yeah, that's where I'm confused, because like the way it's in my head is that they ran in while he was hitting a move, but that makes sense. I remember him hitting the finish, picking up the clean victory over Sammy G. Post-match, Jericho and Hager hit the ring, beat down Luchasaurus for just a second before Jungle Boy and Marco get involved. Jungle Boy actually squaring up with Jericho at one point, hitting like a little roll-up on Hurricane Rana into a roll-up. Marco counts the pin, 1, 2, 3. So a good way to give Jungle Boy his pin over Jericho, I guess, going into their match, making you believe that it could happen. And it was a cool little segment. They did a really great job here. The Sammy G and Luchasaurus match was good. There's nothing bad about it, but I had I guess maybe high expectations because I'm big fans of both of these guys and would have loved to see like a really killer match. But they had a story to tell outside it and throughout it, so I understand why we didn't necessarily get that. And Luchasaurus is still, you can tell he's not necessarily 100%, so there's that as well.
That's absolutely right. He's definitely not totally back yet, you know. He's a little slow. And when he's relying a lot on his moveset being kicks and big boots and you know, all these kind of Muay Thai moves, it's definitely going to hinder him for a little bit. I would have preferred this to be Jungle Boy versus Sammy G, and then, you know, have Jungle Boy still do the same thing with Jericho after the match. You can do that just fine. But we got Luchasaurus, which is fine. I guess they're saving Jungle Boy until that match. I guess they're just going to keep him totally away from the ring, which I don't like that decision, but that's fine, I guess.
Yeah. He hasn't had much of a singles match, I don't believe, yet. So his first singles match being against Jericho will be good. Keeping him out of singles competition, I guess, is to tell that version of the story. But nonetheless, it was a great segment, I have to say. A great way to build to that match next week and give fans a little bit of belief that this guy who hasn't won a match yet could possibly pin the champion. And the best part was like they get that roll up and then Marco and him just dip. Like they bolt out of the ring because Hager's coming in and Jericho's freaking out. And even as after the matches, when we get the announcement of the pay-per-view and a couple other matches announced for next week, and during that we have Sammy G and Jake Hager come up and say, it didn't count. That pin didn't count. And that was just a really great touch to all of that.
Absolutely, it was. It was just Jericho being furious like that and them doing that pin spot. I thought was genius, getting that 1, 2, 3, that unofficial 3 count, just to show, hey, not only can Jungle Boy last the 10 minutes, but he can actually win
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be fun to watch. And the 10-minute stipulation will be fun too because it'll give you. I think we could get that first little big win in the last minute where they're counting it down, and Jungle Boy still manages to secure some quick roll-up victory with 3 seconds left or something. So a good way to potentially build to that, or even a draw, or even maybe a Jungle Boy loss in the last minute or so. I mean, I don't want that, but they could do something like that where it wouldn't be too bad either. So.
Yeah, I feel like there's no way this match ends where Jungle Boy doesn't come out looking good.
Right. So after that segment, as I stated, they announced the next pay-per-view, AEW Revolution, which is going to be February 29th, once again going back to Chicago. I don't really know how I feel about them going back to Chicago again.
I don't like it.
But it's something that I think we'll touch on more on Monday's show, but it's good to have a pay-per-view announced and a date announced and something that we could start planning for.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just excited that they finally put out a pay-per-view. I feel like they could have announced this a little earlier, but that's fine. I'm not that upset about it. I'm just happy that we're getting something rolling. Like you said, I'm not happy about it being Chicago, but like you said, we'll talk about it Monday. But overall, thumbs up.
Yeah. And then we get an announcement of just the matches we have scheduled for next week. Jungle Boy versus Jericho on Dynamite in a 10-minute time limit, non-title. Very specific on the non-title, which is good because we were not the only ones confused. I thought that we were last week, and it goes to show that there were quite a few people a little bit perplexed with what was going on here. So,
yeah. I was worried because one of our friends was posting stuff saying, on the AEW website it's listed as a title match, and on Dark, Tony Schiavone called it a title match, and so I was like, oh man, do I have to get mad about this on the podcast?
Yeah, so I'm glad that they at least got that explained for people. And then another match that they announced for next week, they had actually announced this match on social media earlier in the day. I thought we were going to get it on Dynamite, but I didn't realize it was actually a match scheduled for Dark. We will see I am so confused.
No,
Didn't they announce B. Priestley versus Chris Statlander at some point?
They announced that for Dark, and that's going to be a match on Dark this week.
This explains so much for me because I was so lost because of our group chat. Joseph and AJ a little bit frustrated about the announcement of this match, Britt Baker versus Chris Statlander, which will be a number 1 contenders match next week on next week's Dynamite. Correct? Do I have that right now?
Okay. You got it right.
Yeah. So that, and honestly,
I'm a little upset about this.
I'm a little bit more confused now because Britt Baker. She's had an established run within AEW. She's done fine. Chris Statlander just pinned the number 1 contender, so there's really a reason for her to. Maybe it was going to be Britt versus Hikaru 2 weeks ago. That was what they had in the plans, and then Hikaru loses to Chris, and you're like, well, Hikaru lost her shot in the number 1 contenders match, so put Chris in there. So I mean, you can build a story with it. You can also. I would imagine that we're going to see Chris move up this week in the rankings.
I would hope so.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I've noticed is I feel like they're moving up the rankings and making changes in the rankings, like based upon Dark results. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, they absolutely are. Nonetheless, I'm still a little miffed about this because I don't know. Hikaru Shida is still the number 1 spot, so I was thinking. I get having a number 1 contenders match, and I get you don't want to do Chris Statlander and Hikaru Shida again, but it just didn't make sense to me to have Hikaru Shida kind of totally snubbed, even when you're showing her earlier in the show in the crowd kind of as the number 1. You know, they're looking at her as the girl right now to take on Riho.
Yeah, and they mentioned that quite a few times, so I can definitely agree with you and totally relate there. I'm big on Chris, so that's fine. And I guess it's a way to really just sort of build Britt up to a number 1 contender again, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. I think my Skype went out, so let me call you back. But I'm not that upset about it. I was just more a little bit confused, I should say.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely confusing and can be a difficult part of the rankings and the win-loss records is people are going to want it to be really straightforward sometimes, and it won't necessarily always be that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, go on.
And, well, I was just going to get to, after those announcements, we cut to the main event, but if you had something to add before that.
No, I was just going to say Britt Baker versus Chris Statlander is a fine match. Whoever wins, I'm excited to see face Riho. I think it's going to be a fine match. I'm kind of hoping it's going to be Chris Statlander, though. And I know it's kind of early to pull the trigger on her, but I feel like her going into that title match wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, especially because it's not going to be a title match so far gone into the pay-per-view. It's going to be a title match for the January 1st show, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm totally down with Chris Statlander versus Riho.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would like to see that, and they would be, at that point, Chris would probably have a decent amount of wins under her belt. It's safe to assume that she's going to pick up that win on Dark this week. There's no guarantees, but it's worth assuming.
Yeah.
And then going right to the main event, we had Santana and Ortiz taking on the Young Bucks in a number one contenders match for SCU. Before the match can even get started, Santana, Ortiz, and Sammy G come out and attack the Young Bucks. Brandon Cutler comes to make the save but gets put through the stage. And then we got a pretty awesome match between the Young Bucks and Santana and Ortiz, which at the beginning of the show we mentioned the Young Bucks picking up the victory, looking to face SCU in a championship match next week. I really hope the Young Bucks don't win.
Yeah, I do too. The only thing I really didn't like about this match, aside from the super kick, was the finish. And I really didn't want the Young Bucks to win. I wanted Santana and Ortiz to keep looking like this monster team. Yeah, wrong guys won. Great match. And I'm not necessarily going, oh, I hate it now. But I definitely would have preferred to see SCU and Santana Ortiz. Maybe we're saving SCU and Santana Ortiz for the pay-per-view, which could be, but that's a little ways away, so who knows. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a fun match.
Or maybe some type of triple threat or something.
That would be great.
But the thing, I guess my biggest issue, we talked about it on Monday's show, we definitely didn't want to see Proud and Powerful lose this match. We didn't want to see the Young Bucks pick up this win. I don't want to see SCU in their only second defense as champions, I think, at least thinking off the top of my head, defending against the Bucks this early. That's kind of my biggest complaint there.
I get that.
I just don't love that aspect. Otherwise, if they had a couple more defenses under their belt or even matches as a tag team under their belt up to this point, it would feel a little bit better, but it's kind of weird. They have kind of been unfeatured, same as Riho.
Yeah, they've been kind of absent. The only match we got out of them was not out of them, but it was the triple threat on Dark, and that was just Scorpio Sky winning the match, and it just keeps looking like we're pushing Scorpio Sky, not SCU, and I really don't like that.
Yeah, but nonetheless, the last episode of Dynamite of 2019 looks jam-packed already, just with Jericho versus Jungle Boy, Britt versus Chris, and then SCU taking on the Young Bucks for the championships. Yeah. Looking like a great show there. We'll obviously go over all of that this Monday. Let's go ahead and quickly run down this week's episode of Dark that was taped tonight. We have Vicky Guerrero doing commentary. We also have Chris Statlander taking on B. Priestley, as we had talked about. We'll also see the Hybrid 2 and Pac taking on the Best Friends and Orange Cassidy. So nice showcase for all six of those men there. This is looking like a hell of a card just for Dark. And then we have Britt Baker taking on someone I'm definitely not familiar with, Machiko. And Private Party getting a match against the tag team champions, SCU. So definitely not necessarily that filler episode of Dark as we've talked about before.
What was that second match again?
The Hybrid 2 and Pac against the Best Friends and Orange Cassidy.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, the Hybrid 2's shit-talking and Pac's as well will be really fun to hear in a tag team or in a six-man. So that'll be good. It's cool to see Private Party showcased. I was just thinking about them actually as we were talking about the tag team title match for the pay-per-view.
Yeah, they've been kind of absent, haven't they?
After that big win, they kind of lost a lot of that steam, which is unfortunate. But it's hard to capitalize on something like that if you're not going to pull the trigger on them being champions or anything this soon. And not that I think they should have, and it obviously helps their reputation in the long run to say that they already have that win over the Bucks, so it's not a bad thing. But they've definitely lost the steam.
They have, and it's natural. They can't keep heat like that going, but they'll be able to get it back. I have no doubts about that whenever they do want to pull the trigger on Private Party. So it's just good to see them again. And it's good, like we were talking about, pushing SCU and getting them not only a match, but getting them a great set of opponents with Private Party.
Absolutely, and I think my biggest complaint here is the fact that they announced Britt versus Chris already on Dynamite, because if you waited even until after this week's rankings, because again, if I'm saying that they're changing the rankings based upon dark results earlier in the week, which kind of pisses me off, but that's neither here nor there. We can get to that at a different point. But they definitely have to be, because people are moving up and down based upon their dark results. It just feels that way. So based upon that, if you have Britt and Chris both win on dark, you can push Britt almost up to, you could put her at number 2 easily. Move Nyla down because she's suspended. Move her all the way off because she should be. But if not, move her down to 5. You can move Chris up with a victory. She's at 4, or even 3, because Emmy is 3 and Emmy lost this week. So you can move Emmy down to 5 or 4. You know what I mean? By this week's women's rankings, I could see it making a lot more sense. With these 2 women facing off next week for a number 1 contenders match. It just sucks that they announced it already, because it doesn't make sense right now. It would have made more sense on Saturday at least.
Way more sense. We would have had a good announcement to talk about on Monday too. It would have been just way more appropriate if they just waited a little bit, and nobody's going to be that upset about it if you don't announce it right away. I mean, I get that they want to pull in those fans as soon as they can, but I don't know. You already have a pretty stacked card. You don't have to give that one away right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so that'll be fine. Like the fact that match is being set up, I think that'll be exciting. So, nonetheless, a decent episode of Dark this week, a great episode of Dynamite. What was your main event for the night, AJ? Wednesday night's main event.
I think my main event was the main event. Young Bucks beating Santana and Ortiz, just because of how fun this match was. Yeah,
despite the super kick spot and everything like that, the match itself was fun from start to finish. A great match, a great showcase for all these guys. So I'm right there with you. That was probably my Wednesday night's main event as well. Young Bucks versus Proud and Powerful, which makes the most sense. If you're looking at this card, you had to have assumed, and it was definitely a great match. So if you haven't watched this week's episode of Dynamite and there's only one match you have time to check out, we would definitely suggest that one. But that really wraps everything up for us this week. AJ, go ahead and plug your social media.
You can follow me on Twitter at BigMatchAJ, and you can follow me on Instagram at AJTheFitzy.
And as always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at All Elite Podcast. You can check out our Instagram at All Elite Everything. You can check us out on Facebook at Facebook.com/AllElitePod. And as always, you can follow me on social media at All Elite Andy. Until next time, thanks everybody for tuning in.